As founder of the Palestine Information Office in 1982, then as the official representative and later Palestine ambassador, and as an educator and organizer and networker of great skill, Ali Kazak was at the centre of the transformation of the politics of Palestine in Australia. Ali wrote a book a few years ago about his life and work in Australia, published in Arabic, but not yet in English. We hope that will soon change. In that book, he says, and I quote, I was born in 1947 during a painful era in the history of Palestine, full of turmoil, tension, and fear. Destiny thrust me into a corner far from the town of my birth, where the catastrophe of the Nakba befell my family, country, and people. From the time I opened my eyes to the world, I found myself in a shattered family and country, my father in Haifa and my mother and I in Damascus. The invaders took our country by force, changed its name, dispossessed the majority of my people, and prevented our return. I did not see my father, nor did he see me for 48 years. Unquote. As a young activist, Ali arrived in Australia in 1970 and became a citizen in 1973. At that time, the word Palestine was barely known, except as a place etched into war memorials commemorating dead Australian soldiers. Zionism in popular culture exercised ideological mastery. Israel was, quote, the promised land, a land without a people, for a people without a land. There was no such thing as Palestinians. They did not exist, said Golda Meir. But it was not an empty land, any more than Australia was terra nullius in 1788. The reality of Palestinian dispossession was understood by few Australians. At that time, Arabs were not in favour. There was the 1973 oil crisis, and the media focused on stories about Laila Khalid, Black September, Munich, and the like. Palestinian voices were rarely heard, and representatives of Palestinian organisations were barred entry to Australia till at least 1984. It was in this environment that Ali Kazak, as a young man, came to Australia, got a job in a Geelong car factory, then in an office. He had been recruited to Fatah as a university student in Damascus, and Ali came in Australia to understand the Australian context and worked on a plan to transform it. I worked with Ali from the mid-70s for 20 years fairly intensively. Ali understood that education, outreach, engaging new and diverse audiences, establishing a media presence, building strong relationships with journalists and with Parliament were the key tasks. To further these aims, in 1979, he established Free Palestine, a monthly newspaper. In 1981, a national work of activists, the Palestine Human Rights Campaign was established. In 1982, Ali then received PLO support to establish the Palestine Information Office, first in Melbourne, then shifting to Canberra in 1987. Ali, at that point, when the PLO invited him to set up the office, decided to commit his life full-time to Palestine advocacy in Australia. In his unpublished book, he writes, and I quote, the decision in 1981 to represent the PLO was a big responsibility. I was aware of the extreme difficulty of the task, given the government alignment with Israel, a professional, well-financed Israeli lobby, and a biased media. By contrast, the Palestinian and Arab communities were new and lacking influence, and there was a scarcity of natural material resources. It was, said Ali, a huge challenge. He goes on, if some think about how difficult it is to confront the Zionist movement and the Israeli lobby today, they can imagine how great the difficulty and challenge were back then. End of the quote from Ali. Ali literally worked day and night, 7 days a week. He built relationships with the Department of Foreign Affairs, with ministers and backbenchers from all sides of politics. He organised parliamentary delegations to the Middle East and speaking tours to Australia of leading figures. He initiated cross-party Friends of Palestine parliamentary groups, both in Canberra and at the state level and within the Labor caucuses. After years of work in 1989, the Australian government recognised the PLO and Ali as its ambassador, and then later as the General Palestine Delegation. In 1990, then Governor-General Bill Hayden, who had been a supporter of the cause before some others in the Labor caucus, Bill Hayden as Governor-General met Ali Kazak, the first official meeting at government-to-government level. In 2000, Ali facilitated a visit to the Middle East by then Prime Minister John Howard, and also Deputy Prime Minister and National Party leader Tim Fischer, with whom Ali had a close relationship. But this was only part of the strategy. Ali pushed for state trades and labour councils, for the Australian Council of Churches, for AFIC, for young labour organisations, for organisations in many sectors to pass resolutions of support and engage in projects and actions of support for Palestine. He organised a Treasures of Palestine exhibition from the Opera House and across dozens of venues, and I have to say he organised 1,000 other things. The Israeli lobby constantly harassed Ali, tried to close down Free Palestine. I have direct experience of this. Tried to have him thrown out of the office in Canberra, tried to have him expelled. On and on it went. But they had met an immovable object. He took them on and won the decisive battles. Success is measured in deeds, not words. So what did Ali achieve? Let me list 5 things. In Australia, he built mainstream support and understanding for Palestine and transformed the politics of Palestine in Australia. Despite the huge resource imbalance, the Israeli lobby no longer had it all their own way, especially after 1982 and Sabra and Shatila eyes were open. He regularly briefed parliamentary committees and government officials. Australia's policy changed. In 1987, he became the first Palestinian or Arab ambassador to address the National Press Club, years ahead of the Israeli ambassador. In the region, Ali achieved official diplomatic recognition and support for Palestine in New Zealand, in Papua New Guinea, in Vanuatu, and Timor-Leste. In New Zealand, his tours were remarkable for their media engagement, the public meetings, and the building of the solidarity movement there, as well as in Australia. It was in New Zealand that he met his wife Amina, who came to Australia, worked with Ali, and deserves recognition for the enormous amount of advocacy work she did for Palestine. In the Middle East, Ali's work helped a flow of aid to Palestine and understanding both ways, from National Party leaders with their focus on trade to Ali's advocacy and writings in the Arab press on Australian Indigenous rights. Ali built and maintained strong relationships with First Nations people such as Gary Foley. At the community level, Ali's impact on civil society institutions was profound across the labour movement, the media, the churches, on campuses, at student level, and with Middle East audiences, and seemingly everywhere. So what were the keys to this success? First, Ali was dedicated and hard-working. He had a big picture strategy to transform the understanding of Palestine in Australia, and not to be on the defence, but to go on the offence. That is, to reach out to the centre of politics and build friendships and alliances, solidarity, and concrete actions. Secondly, Ali had a clear articulation of the task at hand. The framing of the issue was one of human rights and the right to self-determination, in language accessible and persuasive across the political spectrum. Goals and demands and messages were to be simple and clear and pursued without distraction, not flip-flopping. It was a long game demanding consistency and political discipline. Thirdly, he had a sound media strategy. He became an effective and authoritative voice and the centre point for regular dispersal of briefing notes and information to the government, to government departments, to MPs, to the media, to the activist sector, and more. In other words, he was a consistent and a reliable, credible voice in the media, especially in times of crisis. Even after Ali concluded his work as ambassador in 2006, he kept up this briefing work right until his unexpected death. In 1986, he won a case at the Australian Press Council on false and stereotype reporting of Palestinians by the Age newspaper in Melbourne. Fourthly, Ali was an amazing networker, and Stuart and Margaret and others will vouch for this, who built relationships everywhere with newspaper editors and senior journalists, with archbishops and clergy and ministers, with ambassadors and judges, with trade union leaders, and in the business sector. He maintained good relations with many parliamentarians, even after they retired, with people like Ian McPhee and Chris Public on the Liberal side, with former Labor Speaker Leo Macleay, former Foreign Minister Bob Carr, Senator Margaret Reynolds, who is with us today, and many others. And he even developed a relationship with Bob Hawke after he retired, one in which Hawke shifted ground more than Ali did. My enduring memory of Ali is as a person with enormous energy. He never stopped his work for Palestine tireless. There was always big thinking, new initiatives, fire in the belly, a desire to challenge, unrelenting determination. Planning the next issue of Free Palestine, Ali would arrive at our house with a folder of telexes and clippings, declaring to Franz and I with a cheeky smile, "It's all there, you just have to put it together." It was classic Ali understatement about the task at hand, but a reflection of the optimism that allowed him to try and do the impossible, which he regularly did. As a young man, as reflected in his autobiography, Ali was somewhat of a free spirit, reading poetry, gazing at the night sky, wondering, and compelled to wander. He was engaged by the politics of black liberation in America and developed a love of jazz and blues, and he loved the music of Pink Floyd, amongst a broad taste in music. Working with Ali, I also learned that he was a gracious host and a great cook of Palestinian food, a skill that had been nurtured by his mother as an aunt, and he appreciated a good Australian red. Ali Kazak, he was a dear friend and comrade. Thank you very much.